Dr. Tim Ober, I'm talking to you directly from Tokyo. You're the head vet there at the Olympic Games representing Team USA, or taking care of the horses there. We know you for a long time, each other for a long time. I know you from the days at Tufts at the veterinary school, and that was quite a while ago back in Massachusetts, and couldn't be any more proud that you ended up in such a prestigious position. So I welcome you to my Talking Horses show.
Thank you, Greg. Nice to be here.
Tell me just briefly your background, because you're an esteemed veterinarian in the show world, but actually I know you from the days when you were thinking about becoming a standardbred vet in the racetrack.
Yes, I grew up around standardbred racehorses. That was always my first interest and my passion, and really was the reason I went to veterinary school. So that's still sort of my first love is the standardbreds. And as fate would have it, I drifted away from that industry and landed in the show horse world.
Team USA is better for it. When we were talking, the Hamiltonian, one of the richest, most prestigious standardbred races, the qualifiers are this weekend and the big race will be next weekend. And why don't you tell me about a special race within that series?
Yes, Dr. John Steele, who was my mentor and the leader of our practice for many years. We've kept the practice going in his name, and along the lines of the way he liked to practice veterinary medicine. He stamped all of us, I think, in a strong way, and we all have great respect and admiration and feel very fortunate for the time we spent with him. We've been hosting the John R. Steele Memorial race every year since he passed away, and that race will be on Hamiltonian Day again this year for the aged mare trot. Looking forward to that.
Well, I have a number of standardbred friends in the audience, and so they'll be glad to get that little part of an inside story about why that particular race is so important. And when we do our coverage of it, I'll try to bring that to everyone's attention. Back to the Team USA and your responsibilities, I took a look. It's amazing the numbers of people that have to be transported over to get to Tokyo. And it came up to like 64 people and 16 horses, something along those lines, because there's 3 different teams really that you're in charge of. And there's all the riders and the substitute riders and then the para people around all this. What kind of amazing organization is this?
Well, it's an incredible amount of logistics. One thing, just to clarify, we have 3 U.S. teams competing here at the Olympic Games. We have the dressage team, the eventing team, and the show jumping team. Each of those teams has their own veterinarian. So I'm the veterinarian for the show jumping team, and there are other veterinarians for one for dressage and one for eventing as well. So we all have sort of corresponding positions with our individual discipline.
I'm glad you brought that to my attention, because that's something I'm unaware of, and I've been in the game for years. So it's a good thing for the public to know. So each individual team comes there with their own lead vet who probably specializes or knows the particulars in the ins and outs of that competition.
Yeah, each vet would the focus of their practice would be on the discipline that they end up working with. The focus of my practice is show jumping. I also work on some eventing horses and some dressage horses as well. But the same would be true for the other veterinarians, but they stick with the focus of their practice.
And on top of that, even though you're the official veterinarian, it's my understanding that you have to be in communication sometimes with the individual owner's veterinarian from back in the States, where they may be in charge of taking care of certain situations or know the history of the horse and how it got to that point. And then they rely upon you to carry out a collaborative effort to make sure that horse stays sound and fit and happy.
That's absolutely right. And that's an important responsibility of a team vet, to keep a good communication going with the regular veterinarian, and also not just around the time of a competition, but that goes on throughout the year.
My hat's off to you for doing such an amazing job with that. That's an incredible amount of responsibility, and you handle it well. As far as the weather there, the traveling there, give us just a brief insight into what the logistics are. I understand that it's very hot there. They're using cooling fans. And remember, these horses are in stables that they're not necessarily accustomed to.
Our horses, the jumpers, they tend to travel back and forth to Europe, sometimes several times a year. I've horses been 8 times back and forth in the course of a calendar year competing. So they get rather comfortable with the transportation process. Flying has become second nature to them, just like for us people. The more we do it, the sort of easier it becomes. And actually, for a lot of them, flying is easier on them than transport by truck. So I'm lucky in that the horses I look after tend to be fairly used to the transportation. So it's less of a stress on them than it might be were they not so used to it. They're also used to going from show to show to show. They'll show 2 or 3 times a month throughout the year, and for good parts of the year anyway. And they're used to leaving home, getting on a truck, getting on a plane, going to someplace new, finding a new stall, and settling into the stable quite quickly. The stables and facilities here in Tokyo are fantastic. Nice big stalls, open, airy stalls in an air-conditioned barn that manages to stay cool from the air conditioning, yet with good ventilation at the same time. The stalls are very comfortable for the horses. Very great facilities for both the horses and the people here.
It's great to hear this. I often like to relate the total equine community. There's a commonality here. Our feed, our farriers, our veterinarians, all of this comes together to make the horses what they are. I did an interview with Doug O'Neill, an outstanding thoroughbred trainer, and he said that he had one horse from California who was a superstar in the Hall of Fame, Lava Man, and he won every major race in California. But when he transported him outside of California, he didn't fire. He just didn't feel comfortable, and the traveling got to him. So what you're telling me is what he said these guys have to get used to being like a professional athlete. They go from hotel room to hotel room, and they got to be able to handle it. That's
right. That's part of it. It's part of being successful at this level as well.
I don't want to bring up anything really negative, but I'm just throwing a couple of things out for the audience. A couple of disappointments. One, I did an interview with some people about Team Israel, and Daniel Blumen, who's on the U.S. circuit anyway and an outstanding rider. In the 11th hour, he got disqualified because his horse that was a substitute for another horse, unfortunately, the paperwork just said American versus Israeli. It's the first time Israel's making an appearance. So he kind of got dinged for it, and it's unfortunate. So it does seem, though, that the federation has to carry out the rules and regulations and standards, and they hit pretty tight to that.
Yeah, the FEI and even the IOC, but I think the FEI sort of administers the IOC rules at this level. The rules are strongly worded and in place for a reason, and leave fairly little latitude, unfortunately. And so Daniel got caught up in that. That was unfortunate for sure. He's a great competitor and a big contributor to Team Israel. So that we all felt bad for him, but we certainly understand why that happened.
He'll be back. And then just recently, the other day, there was an announcement of an Australian Olympic rider who got a positive drug test, and that was from probably recreational use from prior to the Olympic competitions. But again, the rules are the rules.
Rules are the rules, and not only is it our obligation to know them, rules like that are very well publicized.
Yeah, and the reason I bring it up is because I'm sure you're fully aware that the government is getting involved now, whereas the World Federation for Riding or federations, whatever the group of organizations, they're pretty well managed, self-regulated, and anti-doping and all this. But the race world, especially thoroughbreds, they've been unable to regulate themselves. So now the government's getting involved as of 2022, and it's created a whole stir for people. Rightfully so in some ways, because every state had its own rules and regulations concerning medication, which made it a little bit of a quagmire when trainers went from one state to another and found out that they were maybe one day too late in administration of a medication that they otherwise didn't know about. So you're fully aware of all that, and I'm sure that you said, when I interviewed Joe Fargis, he said it couldn't happen soon enough. So just throwing it out for you to make a quick comment.
Well, I guess I would have two things to say. When it comes to equestrian sport, and one asks the question, who's in charge of international equestrian sport? The answer is very clear. It's the FEI, Federation Equestrian International, and they have an executive board and board of directors and a CEO, and so we can say this is the person in charge of international equestrian sport. When you look at sport of ice hockey, the NHL has a board of governors. Gary Bettman's the CEO or the commissioner rather. And you know that Gary Bettman is in charge of the sport of ice hockey, professional hockey. And when you look at racing, who's in charge of racing? There's nobody that fills that category. And I think that weakness is profound and has led to this dilemma.
Well, moving on to more brighter and happier notes, you got 4 super competitors coming under your domain within the jumping world. McLean Ward has probably won more medals than any equestrian Olympiad, to the best of my knowledge. You got Kent Farrington, who's won his share, and Laura Crowd her share, and then you've got a new upcomer, Jessica Springsteen. How do you size these 4 people up? I know they're all superstars in their own right, but what are the strengths, weaknesses? Do they all get along as a team? And give me just a couple of inside pointers that the person who can't be there and doesn't know them would be interested in knowing.
Well, this idea of team competition for a sport that's very much an individual sport most of the year is a really sort of interesting process. Really, when it comes to the opportunity to ride for your country, it's remarkable how well individual competitors come together and help each other out and really form a team in the effort to help each other be successful. You know, every one of those riders wants the other rider to be the best they can be, and they all offer their support to one another in quite a remarkable way. It's quite interesting to see, and I'm fortunate to get to be around it. So they're all professionals, and they really do come together as a team and help each other out. That extends not just from the riders, but to the caretakers of the horses, their regular trainers. If there is a regular trainer involved, everybody comes together.
Just on an interesting note, from my perspective, having been in the game of horsemanship for years, do these riders get to bring their own grooms with their horses? Do they have to clear everything, or are they assigned grooms, new grooms?
No, you have your own groom. Being a groom in this sport is a professional job, and the grooms can make or break the success of the whole effort. One silly mistake can be very costly. So we veterinarians work closely with the grooms. The riders trust the grooms tremendously, and the grooms have a really important job.
Well, I thank you for that. That's an important insight, because a lot of people, all the concentration goes on the riders, the horses, but many times the groom is as much in charge of the day-to-day care of that horse. They know when the horse is feeling well, not feeling well, has an issue, has certain minor issues that they've got to deal with on a regular basis, and the horse has more comfort. They actually relax. People don't realize that they relax in the handling with the right groom. Oh,
very much so. There's horses that really appreciate their groom, and there's horses that wish they had a different groom. So
yeah.
You want to have that combination just right, just like the horse rider combination when they come to an event like this.
Well, you get a kick out of this, but when I interviewed Doug O'Neill, a thoroughbred race trainer of high regard, he converted Lava Man, who was won something like $3 million in purses at gelding. He converted him into his stable pony. And that Lava Man, who couldn't win himself outside of California, is in the Hall of Fame. I told Doug, I said, I think this is the most expensive pony going out on the track. And he started laughing, but he said, this guy knows the sport. He's quiet, he's calm, he's a different horse now that he's not competing, and he gives confidence to the other horses. So that's important too, the pony that they have, the stablemate for going out to the track. So you're bringing up something that's very interesting and very unique and important that the average person doesn't think about.
Yeah, we have to listen to the horses for sure.
Well, let me just ask you one quick final thing. Jessica Springsteen obviously has a lot of pressure on her, and people are looking at her for obvious reasons. And she's the youngest. Everyone else has competed before in the Olympics. Is she up to the pressure?
Oh, absolutely. Put her on the back of a horse. She's comfortable and confident.
Well, that's the second endorsement. The first came from Fargis. I think with those 2 endorsements, we could feel comfortable that she's got as good a shot as anyone in this game. And I'm sure you're rooting for Team USA. Do you see any other team that's of great concern, or do you think they're going to have a good shot at coming home with at least a medal?
This sport has become so competitive. If you look at our Nations Cup series, which we compete in all year, all summer long around the country, and around Europe, any team can win on any given day. Almost there's 6 or 8 teams that are all capable of winning a gold medal. I feel confident we're one of them, and if everything comes together and our horses put in their best performance and the riders are on it as well, then we have as good a chance as any of the other group.
Well, we wish all the riders and their horses a safe trip, a successful trip, and may they perform to the best of their ability. And Tim, thank you so much for being the Team USA jumping veterinarian, and thank you for this wonderful interview.
Thanks for having me.